Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Psyched podcast. I'm your host, Kaya Roman, and today I am so psyched to have Anne Philippi with me. We are so honored to have you here, Anne, joining us all the way from Berlin. And
Yes.
let me tell you a little bit about this incredible woman. Anne is the founder of the New Health Club, a lifestyle platform for mental wellness and psychedelics, exploring the world of neural awareness. Maybe we will learn what that means. The New Health Club show is Europe's leading psychedelic podcast. If you haven't checked it out yet, she started it in 2020 and it showcases experts in the field of psychedelics. You can find it on all podcast platforms. Highly, highly recommend it. Really amazing interviews. Anne comes from a journalist background, writing for Vogue, GQ, and other publications. So she really is an impeccable journalist. Love your podcast, Anne. Um,
Thank you.
she covers everything from, microdosing to psychedelic retreats. The New Health Club also has a really awesome newsletter where CEOs and founders, investors, scientists, therapists, everyone from the new psychedelic ecosystem and business can talk about the disruptive power of psychedelics. And I feel like you are bringing forward some pretty unique information in your newsletter, talking about new markets and compounds and psychedelic medicines. In
Mhm.
2021, Anne was honored on psychedelicinvest.com's list of the 100 most influential people in psychedelics in the world. So we are super honored to have you here with us today, Anne. And I have many questions for you. So let's get into it. My first question is, given your incredible background, especially in journalism, covering everything from fashion and beauty, tech, Silicon Valley, California innovations, you've traveled all
Mhm.
over the world, you've interviewed some of the most interesting people in the world. What inspired you to branch into psychedelics?
Mm, I think it was kind of, I would say, in looking back at it, like a range of 2 years after leaving kind of journalism and leaving LA, because the whole, let's say, Hollywood reporter world was basically not a good idea anymore to be in part
Yeah.
of, because as you know, like the moment social media started, the idea of reporting on Hollywood became, don't want to say obsolete, but it changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's when I left LA because I felt like it really doesn't make sense anymore to go on with this. And for roughly 2 years, I was really completely clueless, to be quite honest, where I would branch out. And I just came back to Berlin asking myself, like, oh, so should I now go back to media? But I felt like I did not want to engage in that anymore. Also because of, I felt like I didn't want to go back to this kind of looking at the world perspective, like how you sometimes have to do it in media, sometimes very critical,
Mm.
kind of, almost like cynical. If you're
Right.
an
You have
author,
to
if
show both sides.
absolutely, if you
Even if
if you
you
wrote
really believe in only one side, you have to have the critical
absolutely
side too.
exactly that, but also you were almost forced to be cynical because then you were really successful. So when you
Mm.
wrote cynical articles, everybody loved you
Oh my God,
in
so
media,
true. Yeah,
but not
yeah,
outside of media.
yeah.
So yeah, but at the same time, I realized I had done so much talk therapy over 15 years, and I kind of felt I still had a completely unresolved topic or topics around me, although I have done so much work, you could say.
Mm.
And then in 2018, I was here in summer, and it was, I think somebody gave me the Michael Pollan book, and of course, I had read a couple of things
Yeah.
before, and then I started to read, and I started to read about LSD, and after LSD, hold the book, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I didn't even read further. I mean, later I read it, the whole book, but because I was so attracted by the way Michael Pollan described the LSD experience that I felt
Yeah.
like, well, this has something to offer to me that it has offered to him. So, and I researched a little bit, which I was good at as a journalist, and found kind of very fast a psychiatrist who was
Okay.
actually very good in this and was guiding people through trips. And then I think in May 2019, I went on my first psychedelic trip ever, which happened to be LSD because I read the Michael
Wow.
Pollan book.
Yeah.
And I had a really good experience, I have to say. I mean, we did like a 4-hour preparation, like should I do it? What's
Right.
medication, all these questions. And then at one point he was like, no, you can come. I think we can do it. And I went there Saturday morning and on a rooftop. And then I was like for 5 hours, I was on a trip. And afterwards it was really like, I did not think immediately, oh, I'm going to change my life. And this is now going to be what I'm going to do the next years. But I think it was kind of almost like a subtle shift that started. And then I started to write about a couple of stories about Imperial College. The first person I met was Rosalind Watts and interviewed her in London, and Robin Carhart-Harris then came,
Amazing.
kind of into the game, like the study he started. So, and Christian Angermeyer, and suddenly I moved very fast into this world without even realizing it. And then, and I think shortly, like 2 weeks before really COVID started in 2020, I went to Synthesis to do a high dose psilocybin experience, like a truffle trip.
Yep.
And after this, I just knew I had one podcast episode. I just knew this was the pace I was going. And then COVID hit and we had a weekly show suddenly because everybody was able to be interviewed and everybody had time.
That was the great thing about COVID,
Yeah,
right?
it
All
was
of a sudden,
fantastic.
everyone was so available.
Yeah, and people were like, oh, great, let's do this. I'm so bored. I want to do something.
Yeah, that
It
was the
was really
upside.
good. Yeah. So, and then it just from there, it just kind of took off.
Yeah.
Just without asking me like where to go.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. I love that. I hear this theme quite often that, people have a psychedelic experience and it opens up this door of new possibilities and it kind of draws you in, and then synchronicities start happening that,
Yeah, you could say.
maybe accelerate even. So I've heard that, and people have even told me like these psychedelics become a recruiter. they draw you in to share the message.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit something to it, but I feel also a lot of people, including myself, kind of got in touch because of personal reasons,
Yeah.
and then it turned into something else. But um, I mean, I really feel like before entering psychedelic therapy, I really didn't have any idea what was actually going on with me, although I did so much therapy and so much talk, mostly talk therapy. And
Right.
I had little glimpses, but nothing compared to what I found out with psychedelic therapy.
So the psychedelics kind of uncovered a different layer for you that you hadn't been able to access before.
Well, I mean, I would say, yeah, and it's also that after roughly 1 year and a half, I really got in touch with, I would say, the biggest trauma I had ever experienced without before knowing that it was that actually. And it was kind of a childhood trauma that I experienced with 7, which was very severe for me, without before knowing that how severe it was actually for me. And then I was able to really see how this had affected my life of the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And like so many people who have that experience where you realize, wow, okay, my brain just told me like, well, this is just, it's so long ago and it's probably not even important.
Right.
But your body obviously tells you a different story. And all these kind of, let's say, connecting the dots, I would not have been able not a second to have that kind of insight. And I mean, I'm kind of still in the process of figuring things out that I just started to look into like 2 years ago, right? So it's kind of I'm kind of in the puberty phase of I'm not even a
Yeah.
grown up yet in a new person. So
Yeah.
it is a really interesting, if I think about it, like the first experience, the truffle experience, like literally 3 months later, I had a very strong insight, not even in the trip. It came really like in kind of integration, and suddenly it hit me that something was coming. It was literally coming back to my mind, into my memory, what I have experienced. So, and from there, I knew, okay, this is now the new. So you have to unpack this. You have to look into your your different life path now.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're bringing up the subject of trauma and kind of framing it in this way, because I think it's really important for people to understand that having a psychedelic experience doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be all light and rainbows, or, all of a sudden all your problems are going to be fixed. You might uncover trauma, which of course is stored in our DNA and informs all of our thought patterns and choices that we're making without us realizing it. And you might find yourself now on a totally different path of discovery. It doesn't
Yeah.
end after the psychedelic
No.
experience. That's when it actually begins. It's like the blinders are lifted and you realize, oh, wow, that trauma, it actually isn't over. It's actually still living in me day to day. And now my
Exactly.
real work begins. So I really appreciate you bringing light to that, because I think it's important for people to understand that that's kind of, the deal. If you do it properly, which it sounds like you really did, you sought out a therapist, you did the research, you went for a psychedelic experience that was really going to provide you with the greatest potential for healing, not just like a fun trip. And that is that's kind of like the beginning of the rest of your life, of uncovering and
Yeah,
unpacking and
exactly.
integrating. It's an ongoing process.
But
So
to me, the most fascinating thing is still that sometimes, like in the trip, you would see, I mean, for example, this one, the first psilocybin trip, it was actually a really, not light, but it was a rather interesting and like super extraordinary experience. But nothing came up that was immediately telling me, whoa, there's some abuse was happening to you. So it was literally 3 months later, in this very interesting moment where your brain is probably still affected by neuroplasticity, like has created some new neuroplasticity, and you
yeah.
remember the weirdest details suddenly after these experiences. And it was in the lockdown, and it was in a very weird moment where I suddenly connected the dots and saw, well, this is not what happened to this Disney character in your experience. It actually happened to you.
Yeah.
And
You're
and
still that
then
little girl.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
still
Yeah,
active in you.
totally. And then because it was the lockdown and you couldn't leave the country, which is, I mean, a crazy thought right now, but it really was at the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And so, but I knew I had suddenly this material that had come up, and then I was like, wow, I need to immediately work on this. And so then I got into ketamine therapy because I couldn't go to the Netherlands. And
Okay.
there were no, because there were no retreats, because, there wasn't even a vaccination yet.
Okay.
So then every Tuesday in the pandemic, I went to
To
this
a
ketamine
to a
practice.
clinic? Were you going to a
Yeah,
clinic?
to a
Okay.
practice. So, and I did it like, I think 12 sessions, because I felt like I
Wow.
need to work on this now. It needs
Yeah.
to come up. So it was almost like you looked at, I mean, it was an interesting moment because there was so little interaction with other human beings at that time,
Yeah.
physical, that I felt like a very interesting machine, even like in that time. I kind of liked, not to say I liked it, but it was an interesting experience to look at yourself like, okay, so this is your material now. now you need to take this material and put it into the next context. So
it's like seeing the
and
coding that went into
almost,
forming
yeah,
who you
yeah,
are. I think
exactly.
maybe that's what
Yeah,
you mean by neural
yeah.
awareness. Like, what is the code that informed those neural pathways that make
Voila.
you who you are and making
Mhm.
the choices that you make every day that you don't even realize?
Exactly. And this neural awareness, I kind of like this expression because it's not only like meaning, oh, you take a psychedelic and something's happening in your brain. It's like in your whole, like how your whole body is involved in reactions, in voices you hear, what happens to your body, like feelings. So it's, I mean, as you learn about yourself, the more you get into psychedelic therapy, how your body is actually immediately connected to all these maybe traumatizing experiences that your brain had forgotten. So
Right.
obviously,
So is your goal with the new health club to spread awareness about this? What are you hoping to achieve? I mean, your
yeah, I mean,
podcast is amazing, your newsletter is
thank you.
incredible, but yeah, what's your mission and your goal behind it?
Yeah, I mean, we have actually two things or three things I'd like to kind of keep pushing more in the next year. So number one is the podcast. We kind of try to do as much live podcasts as possible, which we just did the first time at Soho House a couple of months ago with Rock Fielding,
Yeah.
Amanda Sanso. And it was a really interesting experience that if there's a live audience, how people really are engaging in this, and just there's a whole different energy in the room. So
Oh, I love
this is
that.
one of the goals, to have more audience also, to really engage, in the current discussion, being able to ask live questions.
Ooh, nice.
So, which is, I feel, contributing very strongly to destigmatization, because a lot of people have actually, we had just had an event last night, and like, I feel like a lot of younger people between like 20s, mid-30s, they know already pretty much about psychedelics, but they have very specific questions.
Yeah.
Other people, maybe like Gen X people, are really want to looking into this, but they still have the war on drugs narrative. So,
It was drilled
which I
into
grew
us
also
so
up with.
much.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the Nancy Reagan, just don't
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it.
This is your brain on drugs.
Exactly, yeah. So, but this is one thing that I'm really passionate about, how to create like almost like you could say like an entertainment style around this in a new way. And the second one is that we will collaborate with a bigger company, and I cannot reveal it yet, but very soon, on more specific retreats in Europe, especially in the Netherlands and Germany.
Oh, nice.
And I'm really excited about looking into these more customized and rather specific retreats. Because right now it's basically, okay, there's a retreat you can go to, and then so you come with your topic. But I feel it's really interesting, let's say, if you can offer retreats in a certain mother tongue. I felt it's very interesting when people tell me, I had the same experience by myself, and people tell me, well, from Germany, they had a facilitator who was German speaking. So they suddenly had other almost like content coming up in the experience, because there was somebody connected to their culture.
Right.
And
Makes sense.
so, yeah, and this is something I'm super interested in. And the third thing is really, and I also had a meeting today, to really connect more, especially in Germany and Europe, with people who you could say are established influencers in a society. I don't mean it in an Instagram way necessarily, although I don't have anything against, collaborating with
Yeah.
people there who have
I
a
mean,
strong following.
that's our modern world.
It's just sometimes also very interesting, I feel. But I mean, in what I mean now is like people who are, let's say, would rather host classic society dinners or fundraisers. And I just had a meeting with a very interesting lady from Berlin who normally does this. And we had a very long conversation about how she perceives, I mean, she's like mid-60s, how she perceives that societies kind of at the moment, especially in Germany and America too, is kind of breaking apart because people become more extreme. They don't communicate anymore, and like, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to you. I'm against this. So, and then I said, well, I mean, I think there's psychedelics is a really interesting tool in the future to reconnect to people, like have people reconnect in a way to other people they might not even, you know, go out with or be friends with, but at least not be hostile against them or fight them. And I mean, I think the most interesting example to me there is the study that Leora Rosenman did with Palestinians and Israelis drinking ayahuasca together.
Oh my God, such an amazing study.
It's a very interesting study. And this is also something that's becoming very important to me, to really try to get gatekeepers, influencers who already have also political, let's say, relationships, or kind of, I don't want to say lobbyists because that's rather on a straight political side, but people who are, let's say, part of a society of a country and know a lot of powerful people, how they could be engaged in bringing the topic into the society without all these war on drugs and kind of negative connotation.
Yeah. Wow, incredible. You're really working on it on so many different levels.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the retreat aspect of what you were speaking about. At Wonderland, you co-hosted a workshop on precision and customized retreats with our mutual friend, Lauren, neuroscientist extraordinaire. And I wondered, you know, if you could just explain, what do you see as kind of like the ideal psychedelic retreat? Because, you know, that is a time when, you know, if people really set aside this time and set the intention that they are creating this space and time in their life to have a transformative experience, there's so much potential there. But also, as we know, there's so many different retreats, there's so many different models, there's differing levels of preparation and integration and support afterwards. And you have so much experience in this, so I'd love to hear your take on, you know, on these retreats.
Well, mainly I'm also, I mean, I've been a good customer to a couple of these retreats.
Yes.
But I mean, of course, right now, let's say, I mean, we mainly do this in the Netherlands because it's to me in Europe, it's the clearest legal situation, and it's something that I'm very, very fond of, to be as legal as possible.
And it's just to a clarifying question, is the Netherlands kind of the only country in Europe right now where psychedelics are legal?
I mean, only magic truffles, you know, even like psilocybin, the substance psilocybin per se in the Netherlands, it's not legal.
Oh, interesting.
But truffles, aka magic mushrooms, the word for magic mushrooms in the Netherlands is truffles, they are legal.
Okay.
And the Dutch law is fascinating to me. I mean, it's like such a clever, business-friendly law. But it is at the moment the clearest situation in Europe to do anything like that. So something like that. So
And so back to your market research.
Yeah. So and I think like of course right now you have a little bit of a, let's say, common sense structure. You have people who do vetting, who do the onboarding and talk to a possible customer about, are they on medication? Have they been in psychiatry? Any family related topics in terms of psychiatry or mental health. So ideally you have these people asking you these questions. Not everybody does that, of course, but I would say if you're a really good retreat, then most retreats offer this. And let's say you're ready to go, you can do this, then you arrive, you have a day of maybe like, if you do it in a group, it's kind of like everybody gets to know each other, sharing circle. Often there's a day of breath work and before and one-on-ones with your therapist. And then there's a whole ceremony day mostly, and the day after integration and therapist again. And then maybe, I mean, at the moment, most retreats do like a 5-day thing.
Yeah.
But because the 3-day version is becoming a little, it's a very short time for these really intense experiences. So I think that's kind of something that's just developing a 5 days. So, but I think that I actually, the first time I really started to think about this last summer, I was part of the retreat for the Maryland study about psychedelics and leadership. And it was basically only C-level people, founders, VCs, who actually gathered to really, at Synthesis in the Netherlands, who gathered to look into their ideas of creating a business and why they were even that specific business person or that specific VC person. And it was already a very interesting move towards a whole different experience, I think, for most people. Of course, in the end, you ended or you landed in your personal, topics, and the business per se was, of course, strongly connected to your topics and to your trauma and to your experiences.
Right. It's all
but
connected.
I feel like I had this, I think the most interesting, most interesting experience when back then I went to field trip in Amsterdam to do a travel experience, and the facilitator happened to be also German speaking. And so, of course, we started to speak German a little bit. And then the first part of the trip was really affected or informed by way more by a German history, like, for example, looking into suddenly concentration camps, Nazis. So, and of course, I did not intend to see that, but it came to me because we had a German language, a German discourse around this a little bit before.
Wow.
And for example, in this experience, I realized, wow, everything to me that's heavy and very draining is in German. And then it was over and everything was back to English. And I always have this experience that everything like, oh, it's heavy. It's like, because the German spirit history is heavy. So for many reasons.
There's a lot of history there.
Nazis is one of them, but I think it's a very heavy country with heavy, and it's kind of hard to explain what it actually is, but I never thought of it as a very light and innovative climate here. I mean, there are other qualities, but these are not the qualities. And so that was something that was a really interesting information for me, that I felt like, oh, so if you're in a German context, you feel that way. Like if you're only in a German surrounding, it's not, you cannot blossom. And it's exactly how I experienced it a couple of years later. And another thing is that I feel like a lot of people, when I talk to people who went to these retreats that we refer to certain retreats, they really often said that they wished there would have been people, let's say, I mean, very easy case, like there were 2 gay friends of mine who were like, yeah, I wish I could go to a retreat with other gay men, because I feel there's something that we might address differently, which I will not talk about if they're, like heterosexual guys, even if I might like them, but I'm not going to go there. So, and I think this is something that will, obviously, it's already on the way with this book that I think Via Labate just brought out, like Queering Psychedelics. It's obviously, this is already on the way. And but also something like which we had in the workshop, something like basically looking back into religion and psychedelics. In our case, it was Ben Epstein talking about Judaism and psychedelics. So this is also something that I feel, after a couple of years, starting with Brian Muraresco's book, for example, and a couple of other people like Zach Kamenetz, the first psychedelic rabbi that we had on the podcast. So I kind of feel like a lot of people who would like to look into this therapy, they really appreciate if it's, let's say, a community that they're already in, so they
That they
can,
relate to.
yeah,
They
they
feel
relate to.
safe with their
Exactly.
people. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I
So
guess
it makes
that's the
sense to
concept
me.
of these
Yeah.
precision retreats that are more
Yes,
focused on specific communities. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. And I think this is something that will become a much bigger topic
Mm.
in the future. How it's exactly going to look like, we don't know yet, but I feel, as in my personal experience, I can totally say this, but also like people we sent to other retreats or customers that we had, they were also like voicing this, that they would like
Yeah.
to look into this maybe in a different context.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I have to say, I just really appreciate the lens that you look through as a journalist and a researcher, that you are so detail oriented and, going about this in a way of what is the future and the best way for us to, unfold this new, obviously psychedelics come from a thousands and thousands of years tradition,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but there's a new industry that's forming. It's happening
Hmm.
whether we like it or not. And if we can shape it in the way that is going to help people in the best way possible, we need people like you that are telling the story and that are looking at it through, a really research-based lens. So I really, really do appreciate your work. And I want to make sure that people know how to follow you, how to listen to your podcast, how to get on your newsletter. But I have one last question,
Sure.
which
Go
I'm
ahead.
super fascinated by. You were you were able to attend Davos this year. And I think that is just incredible that, psychedelics were on the agenda for such
Hmm.
a kind of conservative, financial based
Yeah, sure. Sure.
event. The event hadn't happened for a bit because of the pandemic. It happened in
Yeah.
person again. You spoke on a panel about psychedelics as, potentially could it become a mental health HR benefit for employees in the
Hmm.
future.
Hmm.
So for those of us that were not able to attend, which is most of the people in the world,
Yeah.
such an exclusive event, give us a little
Yeah.
peek into what that was like.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
how
Happy
was the
to.
topic of psychedelics perceived by the participants? And will psychedelics become an HR benefit in your opinion?
The answer is yes, but let me
Good.
start with the Davos thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it was organized by the Tabula Rasa Fund with
Yes.
Marik and Maria
Yeah.
and Maya Albert. And I mean, I got invited by Keith Ferrazzi, who was a panelist on the panel you mentioned, and about kind of mental health in a workplace, what would happen if psychedelics would enter this place. And
Right.
suddenly we had this really amazing panel of Rona Levy, Keith, and me, and then the great Natasha Loder from The Economist was moderating.
Amazing.
And the event itself was already really impressive because, I mean, they had invited you could say like the who is who in psychedelics, but
Right.
it was this little house in the what's it called, the promenade. So if you have this pass for Davos, you could just go into these places and then listen to talks. And in our panel, I thought, to me, the most interesting thing was I saw in the audience all of these people coming in, like mostly guys in their, I would say, 30s, running around Davos to look into the careers that they were supposed to
Yeah.
land in,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess. So that's why you go there. So
Yeah.
and and then there were a couple of guys who were really listening very closely in terms of just almost like seeing that if there's an engagement with psychedelics in your workplace, that would be something that they were actually really, really were missing, something like that in the world that they
Mm.
were supposed to be successful in.
Yeah.
And so I also felt that, let's say, people in their 30s, especially the ones who were there, the questions they ask and the conversations I heard is that you could see that they would not sacrifice themselves anymore for a super hardcore corporate company who would actually kick them out after 40 years of working for them. And so much earlier than, let's say, people who are now in their 50s or 60s, I got the impression they would say like, whoa, wait a minute, is this really a company that I would like to be part of, that is actually proud that I work for them?
Right.
And if not, then I'm just going out and do my own thing. So this is something I felt
so much easier to be an entrepreneur these days with all the technology and tools we have available.
At the same time, it's also hard. I mean, it can be also hard. It can be sometimes harder when somebody doesn't say, oh, here's the pandemic, we take care of you, you just, do your thing.
Right.
So, but I mean, still, there was a big shift I thought was happening. And coming back to the HR thing, I mean, this is very slowly on tiptoeing, getting into a couple of corporate companies where, let's say, innovation teams of these companies, and we're just working with one team I can't mention yet, but it's a very big company where the younger innovation team, like early 40s and mid 20s, said like, well, we want to try this. Can you arrange this for us? We would like to look into travel experiences and basically taking it from there, maybe to the next level. So it is actually happening right now. And I think in a couple of years, when a lot of problems around this topic would be resolved, which a company like Anthea is super interesting, I think, working on these resolutions of how to implement it as a company and just take it and put it into your company and offer it as services. So, I mean, it is possible. It's a really good idea on so many levels.
And it will attract great talent. If you are a company that wants to attract these incredible people to come work for you instead of going and doing their own thing, you need to offer them innovative HR benefits. So, and I mean, I think I'm really happy to hear you say that you think that's where things are headed in the future. And, obviously Anthea has had some amazing news recently.
Great. Yeah. Like, I mean, this is what they're doing. This is to me one of the most interesting companies in this whole field.
Yeah. Same.
Because like, it makes so much sense. And there was recently also the study I think it was in Fast Company. I don't know if they did it or they just wrote about it, that let's say Generation Y would be not accepting jobs anymore from companies who are actually not offering a contemporary mental health package for them.
Yeah.
So which means,
I mean, this is the generation that's grown up with this pandemic, right? We've all been so affected by mental health, but that generation in particular. So I'm glad to know that they are prioritizing it.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of legal questions, a lot of data questions. Your boss shouldn't maybe be knowing that you're doing this, for example.
Yeah.
Obvious reasons. And I think Dr. Bronner's had already I think they were the first, kind of offering the ketamine thing.
The pioneers. Yay.
The pioneers, as always.
Yeah.
So, but I think in 5 years, I mean, it makes so much sense. And also, I mean, if I look at my own time in a classic corporate media company, I mean, there was nothing out there. If you would have gone to your boss and said, like, I don't feel so well, and maybe, I don't know, I had a divorce, my parents died, whatever it is.
Yes.
There was nothing available for you. They would have said like, well, take some time, like take a week off.
Take a couple days off.
Shake
it off.
Have a drink,
Yeah.
Take a Xanax and then take a bath and then you come back tomorrow.
Get back to work.
Yeah.
So
That's the
Thank
thing.
you. And I really appreciate your forward thinking. I feel like you've really got your finger on the pulse of where things are headed. So I definitely recommend to everyone out there to follow the New Health Club, follow Anne, and please tell us how we can listen to your podcast, get on your
Hmm.
newsletter, follow you, support you, get involved in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so the podcast is as usual, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, um, how's it called? God, I always forgot this. Oh, the third platform. Okay, let's say Spotify and
Okay, wherever you can find
exactly,
podcasts, you
wherever
will find
podcasts
it.
are available, it's on.
Just
So
search the New Health Club and you will
exactly.
find it. Whatever
And
your
then
favorite podcast platform is, you're there.
exactly. So it's mostly, these days you can't keep track of it almost. And then on Instagram we're at the New Health Club, and LinkedIn, of course, and then the newsletter is on Substack still.
Okay.
If you go on our website, www.thenewhealthclub.de, because we still have a German
Okay.
platform.
thenewhealthclub.de,
DE, yeah,
everyone. Sign up for the newsletter.
exactly. And there you
Yeah.
can easily sign up, or you just Google the New Health Club in Substack, and then
Okay.
you will find it too, and can just subscribe it, which is a really good
Okay.
idea, like you say.
Awesome. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
And
you.
I have more questions, so I might need to have you back again.
Sure,
But this
anytime.
was a good little taste. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And yes, please, everybody, I encourage you to follow along. I will certainly be following along closely with your work. And thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was really fun.